So the topic of today's masterclass is accelerated music learning. And I'm particularly excited about that because we did a survey recently, both of our email list and Musical U members, and it was astonishing how many of you called out practice as a hot topic for you. It's something you were struggling with. And this came up in the sense that people were saying they didn't have enough time to practice, or they were putting in time, but they didn't feel like they were really getting results from it. Or some people saying they sit down to practice, but they're just not really sure what to be working on, and they wander around and go back and forth, and it all feels very ineffective. Like if I had to sum it all up in one word, it was people frustrated that their music practice did not seem to be effective. And that's why I'm particularly excited to have Marc with us today. Marc Gelfo is an expert in just this topic. He is a neurosymphonic hornist, which is not a phrase you hear every day, and he has a passion for holistic health and self-actualization. He's the man behind Modacity, which is a popular music practice app you may well have heard of, which is designed to organize, focus, and track your progress with music learning. So this is kind of the ideal technology companion to somebody who really wants to make the most of their music practice time. I had the great pleasure of interviewing Marc last year for the Musicality podcast. And sorry, I should be polite and say, Marc, please do just say a quick hello to everyone before I ramble on.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to dive right into it and share my screen because we are ready for this. Okay, so as Chris mentioned briefly, I have a background in not getting into music school and then studying cognitive science, applying it to be able to play with ensembles all over the world, tour, record, and also just take my music to places that I never expected it could, as far as being satisfying. So what we're going to talk about today is how to accelerate that process. And first thing we're going to do is get a warm-up. So the warm-up in this case is getting a notebook or something that you can write things on. So if you have a notebook nearby, this is semi-optional, but basically required. See if you can just grab a piece of paper, Post-it notes. If you've got Evernote on your computer, whatever your favorite note-taking is, get it right now. And I will explain why in just a second. Okay. Hopefully some pencils, papers have rustled out. This 42% number down here, that is how much more likely you are to achieve a goal if you write it down. And I don't really know why that is, but I think that what it has to do is the formation of your ideas in physical reality, aka writing them down, making them tangible, in some way makes them more real. And so what I'm going to ask you to do on the paper that you have today is to take some notes and ideas, phrases, whatever jumps out at you as something that you want to take away, that you want to make more real in your life, that you actually take the time and write it down. And if you can write it down physically with your hand and a pen or pencil, that is ideal. So to accelerate music learning, you only have to do 3 things. And I'm going to ask you right now to write down what you think those 3 things are. No wrong answers. Just if you had to give yourself three keys that you need to do to accelerate your music learning, what would you have to do? I'm going to give you a few seconds to write down your answers. Number 1 might be what? And number 2 might be what? And number 3 might be what? To accelerate your music learning.
Well, we give people a chance to write down, and maybe people can share in the live chat if they are willing to. I wrote down practice regularly, pay attention, and drink coffee. Am I right? Did I nail it?
Absolutely.
So we have Violin Fanatic in the live chat saying deliberate practice, efficient practice, and write down your goals. Napasha Music says, practice more regularly, be nicer to myself, and practice like I want to perform. I like the be nicer to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And Amord Powell fan says, basics, recording, and listen to masters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Anybody else coming through the YouTube?
Yeah, a couple now. We have a bit of a broadcast delay, I'm afraid, so answers will lag. But Matthew is saying planning out practice, recording, and visualization. Marilyn says practice, plan, and evaluate. Rofaced says spaced repetition. Margot says practice slowly. Susan says visualize the goal, record attempt, and then review and decide if it worked. Margot also says use patience and go slowly when learning new pieces. Karen says break issues into the smallest possible, focus and fix the problems. Charles says be goal-oriented, set realistic objectives, and have rewards for success. Amy says don't overwork. Samuel, practice, record, and listen to the greats. Nancy, dedicated practice, 10 minutes minimum per day, and share and record what I play. Amanda says practice, focus, care. And I'm going to wrap it up with this one, I'm afraid. Steve says learn, practice, and visualize. Please do feel free to keep posting them in the chat, but I should let Marc continue.
Oh, this is wonderful. I'm just so excited to hear all these things from people. Thank you for sharing. Indeed, there are no wrong answers to this, but here are my 3 things that I want to share with everybody, and probably pretty similar. They are leverage time, master your state, and music more, make more music. So think for a second, how are yours similar? I hear a lot of people talking about time and kindness, patience would be a state, listen to masters, play every day, music, that would be like music more. At the same time, these are going to be a little different as well, as far as 3 kind of high level principles that drive accelerated music mastery forever. And I'm going to dive into leverage time first. So being time conscious is the first principle of making the most out of your time. That actually means being aware. And what you're seeing here on the screen is just a little screencast of like Modacity, where you can set up a practice session and budget your time and make a plan for how you practice. This is probably familiar to a lot of people that are already using Modacity. But one thing that I did for like 10 years when I was transitioning from music school student to professional musician was keep a practice journal. And I would write down a timestamp and write what I was doing and maybe a couple notes, and then write down another timestamp and another thing that I was doing. And it made me conscious of time. Like, okay, it's 12 o'clock and I'm doing this thing now. But I wasn't using my time very well. So the first step of leveraging time, of making the most out of your time, is becoming conscious of it. So that also means becoming conscious of your relationship with time. Like if you really enjoy knowing what time it is, for example, and it's very easy for you to keep track of time in your head, then you can kind of delegate that to yourself. But if you're the kind of person that loses yourself in an activity, like I would be the second case, then I set a ton of timers. And I was even on the phone with a friend of mine last night, just no time constraints, just talking. And he said, all right, I want to talk about this thing. Let's set a timer for 10 minutes and then see where we get. And that gave me such a huge sense of like relief and effectiveness, because I knew that we wouldn't get sort of carried away down a rabbit hole, that we could cover the things that were most important to us. It's the same thing when you're practicing. You want to be aware of how you're using your time and use the best tools for that. So a plan helps, because when you decide in advance how you're going to use your time, then you can just delegate it to a system, make the decisions in advance, and then you don't have to be deciding every single moment what you're going to be attending to. I definitely remember pre-Modacity, it can be kind of overwhelming in a lonely way to sit in a practice room and just it's you and your instrument and a million different things that you could be doing at any given moment. a million different ways to focus and a million opportunities to improve, even if you're staying on one piece of music. So having a plan in advance really helps. That to me is the biggest element of time consciousness. It's having a plan and being able to follow it by using tools that respect your relationship with time. And Olympic teams always practice on a plan. Businesses, all great businesses execute on a plan. And it is my premise that if you want to accelerate your music mastery, becoming conscious of time and executing against plans will be a great ally for that. Because otherwise, what does accelerated even mean? It means in the context of time. So if you're not tracking your time, if you're not aware of how much you're practicing, how much you're getting out of your practice, then you simply cannot experience acceleration. So consciousness is the first step. And then there are 1,000,001 time hacks that you can employ. What are time hacks? That would be things like understanding the difference between massed and interleaved practice. Mass practice is when you practice the same thing in a row, say a C major scale, and you do it 10 times in a row. And it will get much better in those 10 times. You'll really feel a sense of groove. That's kind of the naive way of practicing. It's what we know. You try and do it, and you try and do it again, and you try and do it again, and you try and do it again, and you get it, and you leave it. What happens is that kind of stuffs it into your short-term memory, but it doesn't actually drive it in deep. What we want is to produce remembering of a skill, drawing it out of long-term memory, not out of short-term memory. That's what interleaved practice accomplishes for us. So if you can see, I've got a Modacity practice session illustrated on the right, and I've got vibrato centering, something I practice almost daily. But instead of doing it for 2 minutes on this session in one chunk, I'm doing it in 2 chunks of 1 minute. Same thing with rubato. But what that means is that I practice vibrato centering, and maybe I get some insight about how it feels or an improvement that I can make. I move on to something else. I hit rubato, and then I come back to vibrato centering after it's had a chance to settle. There's a biochemical reason for this, which is that we're myelinating nerve pathways, meaning that we're making them stronger. And it actually literally just takes time for everything to layer on. And that process of learning is a physical process that takes time, minutes, hours, days, weeks. So interleaving your practice is a really good way to make sure that you keep refreshing the skill and the improvement. If you are practicing something for 3 minutes or 6 minutes in a day, it might make sense to break it into 3 individual 1 minute chunks or 2 individual 3 minute chunks. I can't stress enough the importance of interleave practice. It was number 1 on this list of time hacks. And the next one is mastering attentional flow. And this relates to mass and interleave practice. So last night I was working on 3 or 4 different things. I was working on a Brandenburg concerto. I was working on this presentation. I was working on some emails and other miscellaneous things. And what happens is that you start to feel a sense of like when it's time to move on to the next thing. And that is a very individual threshold. But understanding how your attention flows through time, and when you're undersaturated on something and when you're oversaturated on a particular thing, will allow you to interleave wisely. Meaning, for example, last night I was working a little bit on this, and then I kind of got stuck. So instead of banging my head against a wall, I went and moved over to Brandenburg concerto and worked on that. So it was an example of interleaving. And when I worked on Brandenburg, I got insight about how to move forward with this presentation. So I interleaved my way back to this presentation. And understanding how my attention was flowing and what I needed at any given moment allowed me to make intelligent, personalized choices about how to interleave my time. And I would encourage you right now just to think about how you practice. Are you being aware of your attentional flow? Are you aware of where your attention is going and when you're getting tired, when it's time to move on to something? Or are you just kind of pushing yourself through? And how much are you taking advantage of the opportunity to interleave? Just a little moment to reflect there. The next time hack is structured decision making. This is when you quote unquote set it and forget it. And as you can see from the practice session on the right here, I already have structured a bunch of decisions about how I'm going to use my time. What that means is that I don't have to make any decisions about the clock. I don't have to make decisions about the timer. I don't have to make decisions about what I'm going to practice or what I'm going to focus on when I already have that structure in place. And time is an interesting thing. Time is, you could almost say the same as attention. So it's a resource and it's a limited resource. And when I am not focusing on managing my minutes, I can focus on doing something else. And doing that something else means that my time is being spent on something more valuable. So structured decision making means making decisions ahead of time using structures that you know will support you based on your self mastery, which should be ever growing. And the way that you grow that is by making plans, trying to execute on them, and then noticing how things go. That's one way to do it. The reflection is important, but you don't get reflection unless you get like a hypothesis or a structure in advance that gives you that contrast. That brings me to meditation. What if you could stop time? What if you could slow time? What if all of a sudden things came into focus and you could just move slowly, peacefully, enjoyably, mindfully between points? That's what meditation does for you. And I consider it the ultimate practice because all other practices are enhanced by meditation. Meditation allows you to build your focus. It trains you to experience the present moment. And meditation gives you discipline to execute on your decisions. It gives you the awareness to know where your attention is going. And it gives you the skill to direct it in a way that supports your musical goals. So if you want to enhance your music making, if you want to accelerate your music making, meditation is going to unlock that for you.
Marc, sorry to interject, but this is such an important and valuable point, and I see in the chat Matthew is saying meditation is amazing. 10 out of 10 recommend meditating on a daily basis. Marc, I wonder, I didn't prepare you for this, so I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I wonder if we might unshare your screen, and could we just take a minute and have you talk people through what you mean by meditation and what this might look like? I ask because I remember it would have been for me back in maybe 2012-ish. I was hearing all of these great things about meditation and, like you just described, all of these amazing benefits for mindfulness and presence and decision making and attention. And it sounded amazing. And it took me quite a while to find the right book or the right explanation to actually try it. And I, like yourself, come from a very scientific background, and it was not obvious or natural to me. And I know you're someone who can describe this really well. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just explaining for anyone who's listening and being like, meditation sounds good, but I have no idea how to do that, or it's way beyond me. Maybe we could just talk them through something.
Yeah, actually, let's just meditate for a minute. I'll guide it. So everybody, I'm assuming most of you are seated. If you're standing, I trust you to modify this, but just feel into your seat for a second. Get both your feet on the floor and flat on the floor right in front of you. And you may want to adjust your seated position to get a little more comfortable, a little more straight. And rest your hands in your lap wherever it's comfy. Feel your hips in the chair. Just get a little grounded in there. Start to accept that we'll be sitting still for 30 seconds or a minute or so. Feeling up the spine, finding just some basic, simple alignment around the lower back and abdomen, middle back, solar plexus, the upper back, chest, and you may start to notice that you're breathing. If you're not breathing, call a doctor. And notice the shoulders, maybe bring some relaxation. In fact, let's just raise our shoulders up real high, squeeze them up and roll them back. And bring them up one more time. Inhale, exhale the shoulders down and let them sit for a second. That might feel good. Shake out the neck, a shade. And we're just balancing the head on top of the neck. Balancing the head on top of the neck, finding the direction up. So we're kind of seated here. This is a prerequisite for meditation, is starting to create some physical stillness, at least at first. And just notice that you're breathing. We've gotten rid of all the people that aren't breathing. But luckily, we're all breathing. And your body will breathe itself. You don't need to interfere with it. So what you're going to do right now is just watch for one breath, one full breath of in and out. And you may want to say in to yourself when it goes in, and out as it goes out. That's just one breath. You can close your eyes gently if you feel comfortable going inwards. A meditation happens one breath at a time. And what happens is, as we start to watch the breath or a single point of focus, let's continue just watching the sensation of your breath, wherever that may be, at your nose, at your throat, at the expansion and contraction of the abdomen, the chest. Just watching it as you would a movie and listening to me talk. You'll notice that you will have thoughts. You will have thoughts other than I'm breathing in or I'm breathing out. Especially if you do this for 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes. And when you get that thought, there is your opportunity to notice that your attention has shifted from the place that you chose to put it, and kindly, gently, compassionately return the attention to the breath. When you have a thought, simply return the attention to the breath. We'll try it for 5 breaths now. Isn't it amazing how long 5 breaths can feel? So opening your eyes, that's the quick and dirty intro to a focus point meditation. There's other ways to meditate. And if you're interested, I have actually have a guided interval meditation on YouTube that I can share as one of these links. And of course, Headspace, calm.com, tons of great resources these days, free resources for getting started with that. That would be the quick and dirty. Chris, do you have any
Fantastic. No, thank you. That was perfect. And I'm sure there were some who have done meditation to no end and for whom that was just a welcome opportunity to do so. And I'm sure there were others who were sat there thinking, come on, get on with the presentation. Why aren't we doing anything? This is crazy. And that is exactly the kind of instinctive reaction that meditation can help you get a handle on. And so the only other thing to say before I let you continue, Marc, would be, how does this factor into music practice? Is this something people would do at the beginning or in the middle, or how does it, or maybe separately to give them an overall more present state?
Yeah, generally for music practice, what you'd want to do is do something with the body first, so that you make sure that your physical state is good, that you're warm, that you're relatively happy in your body, and then you can sit and just prepare your focus so that, I don't know about you, but I feel a little bit more chilled, a little bit more in the zone, even after just 10 breaths worth of meditation. And your practice will benefit. The music practice benefits. Get the body set up, do 30 seconds of meditation, or a minute or 5 minutes if you really have a ton of time. There's a famous saying, if you think you don't have time to meditate, then you need to meditate.
Absolutely. And it's counterintuitive, right? I think you just touched on it there, wherein you feel more calm and ready to go at a slightly slower pace. And, it might seem odd to people that is what we're trying to accomplish in the middle of a presentation about accelerated music learning and doing everything very quickly. But of course, it is putting you into that state where the learning can happen more quickly, right?
I saw an elephant recently, and the elephant, it was funny. Yeah, you could see the trainer walking next to the elephant. I was in Thailand, and the elephant was moving very slowly, and the trainer was walking very fast next to the elephant to keep up. And what we don't realize is that up here, it's not just a trainer inside. There's a little monkey inside, the monkey mind, that's saying, "Oh, I want a banana. I want this. Oh, you suck. And there's this huge, wise beast of an elephant in there that represents our highest self, our collective consciousness, like the shared wisdom around humanity. And that is huge. It's a juggernaut. But if you ride on that, you move a lot faster than if you're running haphazard next to it with the monkey mind. Slow is fast.
I love that analogy. Terrific. Well, there were a couple of comments and questions about meditation, which we'll save for the Q&A segment. And Marc, please do reshare your screen and we can continue.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. I needed that. All right. Meditation. Oh, going slow to go fast. Yeah. I had a personal trainer once. He said, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And we already heard this from a couple of comments, people saying that they want to be more patient, go a little slower. It's true. When you go slow and when you go smooth, that ends up ingraining patterns that can eventually go very, very fast. So that is a time hack that a lot of people are not aware of because I think they want to do more, faster, faster, faster. In fact, the slower, bigger, stronger is the way to go. Okay, and finally, hacking habituation. This is a really fun one. Habituation simply means that you get used to things that are in your environment. Like most of you are not aware of the feeling of your shirt or your shoes or socks or whatever you're wearing. I know it's a Skype Masterclass, so no assumptions, but that is something that you're not aware of. You habituate to it, or you habituate to the fact that you're breathing air. Well, when we practice, we habituate to our environment, we habituate to our sound. As a French horn player, I've always got the bell on the right side of my body. And one thing that I do is I just play reverse. And it sounds so different when the bell is in my left ear. It's really weird. Now, as far as learning goes and accelerating music mastery, we can actually leverage this fact. This is a major time leverage point. There's a bunch of environmental learning studies that show that you recall things better in the environment that you learn them in. So if you study for a quiz on a beach, then you will recall and perform better on that quiz at the beach than you would in the forest. Or orange classroom versus green classroom, you will do better remembering those things in the context that you learned them in. And that can be scary for us because we rarely perform in the places that we practice. So one way that you can hack this and hack this habituation is actually to change your environment and make sure that the environmental learning effect only applies to your internal environment. And one simple way I do that, can welcome questions about this, but one simple do it for the rest of your life tip that will really change things around is to change location in your practice room. So you're looking forward, you've got 360 degrees of rotation. Just rotate yourself 90 degrees in between reps. If you play 4 different scales, play them facing north, south, east, and west. And what that will do is give you a different environmental context and avoid habituating. It's a really, really powerful, simple time hack. And yes, spaced repetition. We all do it, and there are many opportunities to do it better. Spaced repetition in its simplest just means that we need to repeat things. After repetition is a spice of life, after all. And we want to space the repetition of those things such that we optimize for remembering them, because why repeat it if you don't want to remember it? So the basic principles here are what fires together, wires together. And if you are, doing fingerings on your instrument and singing, then the melody and your fingers will wire together. If you are thinking really, really negative, destructive thoughts as you're listening to yourself, then you will learn to associate your sound with negative, destructive thoughts. The brain is agnostic about what it wires together. You get to decide. That's why mindfulness, that's why training your attention is so important, because we repeat a lot. We repeat so many patterns day to day. And the forgetting curve here describes when you're first learning something, that you will forget it within a matter of days unless you review it. So you can see down here, if you look, you first learn it, you're going to 100% retain it. Within 3 days, you're going to be down to 60% retention. But if you revisit it on day 1, then you get another 2 days and revisit it on day 3, revisit it on day 6, and so on. And each time you revisit it, it lasts a little bit longer. It gets a little bit more permanent. And there's ways to hack this curve. For example, like high valence emotions will really make you remember something. A negative version of that, we all have at least, one major emotional trauma that we probably remember very easily, didn't need to repeat it. And we also probably have joyful moments that we can remember that, bam, we were just really, really excited and it stuck forever. So the more emotionally activated you are, the deeper things get. And we're going to talk about that in Master State, the next section. But the idea of spacing your repetition intelligently simply implies that, yes, you must repeat things in order to remember them. And that means that you need to be organized so that you know what to repeat. And I'm really looking forward to building a spaced repetition algorithm and modacity so it can tell you when to practice. But for now, it's kind of like we need to do that by ourselves. Okay, so principle number 2 of accelerated music mastery is mastering your state. And if you felt like this image when we were meditating, then congratulations. It's a pretty esoteric thing. But the idea is we are kind of crazy interconnected beings. We're made up of tons of cells. We ourselves are cells in family, and families are cells in society. And it's just a big big fractal universe out there. And our state, our individual state, how we feel as humans is very important. Objectively subjective. It's the integration of objectivity and subjectivity. So I'm just going to ask you, how do you feel right now? How do you feel right now? Take a second and check in. If anybody is willing to authentically share in the YouTube chat, maybe we can just get a ping. Chris, if you're willing to.
Yeah, for sure. I am keeping an eye. There's a little broadcast delay, so we'll give people a minute or two to answer. For myself, I'm feeling a little, you used the word oversaturated earlier. And, I was sure this presentation would be packed with goodies, but even as someone who considers themselves fairly well versed in learning theory and that kind of thing, there's been a lot already. I'm excited that we're only just moving on to section 2. So I think emotionally I'm feeling a bit intense, but in a good way, engaged. My butt is feeling a bit tired, I will confess. I've been sitting on a very hard chair for the sake of this presentation, so physically, that's what I'm aware of. I'm a little bit over-caffeinated, but it was balanced out a bit by the meditation, and that's where I'm at. I can see people in the live chat now saying Rofaced feels excited, Charles feels focused and interested. Violin Fanatic says they have a short attention span, so has to focus their attention. Amord Powell fan says excited to learn and heavy legs from sitting. Zach says amazed and grateful.
Awesome. I'm feeling really good right now. I'm feeling a little concerned about time. I want to check in and make sure that we don't need to end promptly on the hour.
Thank you for checking on our account. You don't. I apologize that we are running a bit late. That's probably me jibber-jabbering at the beginning and asking for an on-the-spot meditation explanation. Nope. And if people do need to tune out, we will make the recording of this available to everyone for a short period over the next couple of days. So if you do need to jump off, don't feel too bad. We'll give you the chance to catch up. But hopefully everyone has a bit of leeway in their schedule, including you, Marc.
I'm totally good. And don't worry, any section on mastering state would be incomplete without a stretch break. So we're going to get there in just a second. In fact, line 2 says stretch break. So everybody please stand up. And I'm going to unshare my screen just for a moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to push our hands together at heart center. Just really push them together like, oh, I'm pushing as hard as I can. I'm standing kind of with a wide-legged stance as well. And now that I'm pushing them together just a couple more minutes, I'm going to push out against the invisible walls on either side of me. My body was facing north. I'd be pushing west and east. And breathe a little bit, really push, fingers up. And now we're going to take and turn our palms up. And go with our arms beside our ears, stretching up, 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 up. Fingertips stretching up. And interlace the fingers. Turn. And push the palms towards the ceiling, towards the sky. And then we're going to take that same interlace, but we're going to do it behind the back. Opening the shoulders, opening the chest. And if you're feeling exploratory and you want to join me, you're standing up, just take a little bend over through the old hammies. Take your breath, bend the knees as much as you need. And in fact, if you're doing this bend over, then bend the knees, touch the floor. And come up. Opening up, opening the arms. We're just going to take a stretch of the hands real quick. Fingertips back. Musician stretches. Other hands. And we're going to do the shoulders. So we're going to take the right arm over the left arm. And see if we can get a little eagle arm style. Breathing into the back. Move the elbows however you see fit. And exhale. Now we're going to take the left arm on top of the right arm. eagle arms. And another good inhale, exhale. And like a good morning stretch. Yeah, open, yawn. Make some noise out there where no one can hear you. Couple roll of shoulders, and we are ready to continue with mastering state.
Fantastic. I would love to know, we did that as a stretch break in this masterclass. Is this something you would recommend doing mid-session or at the beginning or a bit of both?
Well, at the beginning, what you want to do is a little bit more dynamic movement. So I'm just going to, actually, this is a really good question. I'm going to show dynamic movement for our next stretch break because we have one more. Is that cool?
Perfect. Yep. Rofaced in the chat is saying he hasn't stretched that much since high school sports.
Is my screen on?
I'm seeing your camera at the moment.
Okay, so objectively subjective. What that means is that we have a subjective experience and we are experiencers of life. And at the same time, we can bring some objectivity to it and simply state, I am feeling relieved from stretching. My mind feels peaceful and excited. My body feels open. My emotions feel grateful. My spirit feels, fairly expansive. And being aware of those, but being aware of them objectively as a witness of them is the integration point for mastery and a requisite for accelerated music learning. Food plays a really important part in here. Movement plays a really important part here. I was just listening to an interview with LeBron James on Tim Ferriss show. LeBron being an incredible long-term athlete in the NBA, played, I think, more than 40,000 minutes of basketball, professional basketball. And he is so careful about his food choices. That was the number one thing. He said, I'm really consistent about my food. Now, as musical athletes, as people that need to fuel our bodies and our minds and our emotions to give and our spirit as musicians, we must put in quality fuel for this. You will not learn fast if you're pumping Special K into your body. I mean, like the sugary cereal stuff or chocolate covered espresso beans for lunch. We need all of the nutrients, all the building blocks, the physical building blocks of learning and of wellness in order to learn quickly. Otherwise, this wonderful, marvelous body machine doesn't function right. So I really want to encourage everybody to reflect on your diet, your dietary choices. Hydration is really important. It makes a huge difference for your practice session, having water around. And sipping water during the practice session as well is like the lowest hanging fruit for cognitive optimization. The other low hanging fruit is movement. That means stretching. It means dynamic motion. It means being aware of how your body feels. And on the right side here, we've got this sort of controversial screen from Modacity. Some people love it. Some people hate it. That says, rate your mastery. How did it go? And it gives you 0 to 5 stars. This is a perfect example of objective subjectivity. You get a number, 0 to 5, but it's on something that really can't be quantitatively measured, which is your mastery. What you're doing here is checking in. Say if 0 is I just learned this and 5 is it's world-class mastered or whatever my top standard is, you kind of just ping yourself and say, hey, on an intuitive gut level, like how does it feel on that journey? And it turns out that we're remarkably consistent on these sort of personalized ratings in the scientific literature. So it's very valuable to take that moment and reflect, and then you will actually also be able to see how that grows over time or sometimes shrinks over time. So as far as accelerating your learning, I think becoming aware of patterns is really important. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But you can't track the patterns unless you sort of measure them in some sort of way. And that's where the objectivity comes in. Finally, inner mastery drives outer attainment. The more that you are able to master your inner state, being kind, being spacious, being aware, the more you will achieve in the outer world, the more the outer world will reflect the qualities within to you. So I really want to encourage everybody to think about their inner state more frequently and to master that as a way to bring about the changes that you would like in the outer world. Okay, and listen to yourself. That's part of it. Oh, we've got another screencast here from Audacity. We make it super easy to record yourself, listen back at different speeds, lay the Metro drone over to check your rhythm. That's on a musical state. Actually, this is one of my favorite music hacks for accelerated learning, is to check your tempo by using the metronome on top of recording. But the other thing is to listen to yourself regularly. This is saying weird tone, otherwise good eighth notes. Take notes, constructive notes, and make sure you improve what's important. So this is how the improve function works in Modacity. You choose what you want to improve, and then you test a strategy. But don't just listen for, did I get the right notes, for example. When you listen to yourself, listen for what kind of state is present. And listen for how the recording makes you feel. Do you feel annoyed when you listen back? Do you feel excited? Are you interested? Are you bored? The way that the music affects you, the way your own music affects you, is a really, really good cue for how it might affect others. And if you're thinking, oh, that was terrible, then chances are that it's not that it was objectively terrible, but that actually you were playing with feelings of self-judgment as the emotional undertone of what you were playing. And this happens a lot when people play technical exercises. They'll play na, 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 na. And you can hear, I hope that all of you hear that sounded kind of bored and annoyed and frustrated and forced. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can also be da, 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 da. And not technically perfect, but way more enjoyable. And I could go deeper and deeper into how your inner state actually drives the quality of what's being performed. So listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to the audio that you produce, listen for more than just notes and rhythms, and be aware of what goes on in your mind as you're listening to yourself. And that will teach you a lot. It will really, really help you shift into different ways of performing, different priorities that are way more aligned with musical progress and musical sharing and musical enjoyment, which is really why we want to make progress at the end of the day, is to more deeply enjoy our involvement with music. So take constructive notes. Make sure, what does constructive mean? That means that it's going to promote learning. It's going to promote you taking clear actions. You can see on this screenshot, we automatically create notes when you find a strategy that works, and free the body of stiffness. Why is that constructive? Because it tells you what to do. It's not negative. It's not like don't be stiff, for example. And it's very clear. So constructive notes are about contain instructions or what to do, things that you liked, or very, very careful framings of what you want to avoid. Now, history spirals forward. We've all heard past performance does not predict future results. I totally disagree with that. Past performance does predict future results much of the time. And I recommend that you use the past and observe the past in order to guide the future, because you do have power over how the future unfolds. And on a sort of simple level, Modacity provides a star rating graph. Looks like we're not going to get there, or maybe we will. But here's my history on this particular item, and I can see that I did 4 minutes, but I lapsed a little bit in mid-January, and I can think, oh, it's because I was in Thailand. I can see my star ratings down here. And this star graph is really useful to see how your mastery is changing over time. And I can see that why it changed was probably because of these dips in practice time. And the more I practiced it better, it got better, it dipped, and then I started practicing it some more and it got better. It's important to track your history so that you can become aware of it and then decide what to do. So I'm going to ask you again on your note-taking device or notebook to write down 2 or 3 things what you think is important to track in your practice. What is important to track in your practice? You can also write it into the YouTubes or wherever. I think it's important to track, for example, joyfulness. Okay, and what's not important to track? What's not important to track? For example, there may be little details that you don't need to include. All right, another quick stretch break. And for this one, I'm going to show some dynamic exercises. It's a dynamic exercise. This is more what I do before I get started to practice. So floppy wrists, I'm just completely relaxing my wrist and shaking it out. And then same thing, floppy elbows, floppy shoulders. Shake the neck a little bit. Shaking it, no, and then we're gonna shake it, yes. And then I don't have much room in here, but something that's really, really great are these spine twists. Sometimes I'll do 5 or 10 minutes of just spine twists. It's lubricating the entire spinal column, allowing the arms and shoulders to relax down. It raises your heart rate just enough to get the blood pumping without making you sweaty. And it's just a really wonderful way to establish some good alignment and well lubricated joints. If you want that synovial fluid to be lubricated, we want healthy, happy motion. Shake out my elbows and wrists just a little bit more. I'm also going to do my knees up. Hip circles are really good. If you imagine we're doing a secret hula hoop, if you play standing, it's really important, especially to get these hip circles in. I'm going to switch directions. Society of sitting in cars, sitting at desks, sitting all day does not make for happy hips. Happy hips don't make for a happy spine. Unhappy spine makes for unhappy mind. So it's important to give some love to the hips every day. You want to accelerate your music journey. It's funny, it really does start in the hips. All right, great. That's my stretch break. Everybody still with me, Chris? We're doing well?
Doing well. Yeah, the chat went a bit quiet while everyone did their hip swivels, but we did have Violin Fanatic saying it's important to track how I feel, and Napasha Music saying track my ability to maintain positive thoughts.
Yeah. Ooh. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a really good one. Okay, great. I love this kid's expression. He's really rocking it out. And I hope that all of you today that are listening rock just as hard. Like, this kid should be your baseline for how engaged you are when you're playing. So the first thing, what is to move musically? And you see this kid, he is not sitting bored, slumped over a chair. he's really engaged. His hips are in it. His face is in it. His arms. I mean, his actual alignment, like most kids, is very solid. It's a beautiful sort of wave through his body, but he's moving. And we need to move musically. It's very, very important. The way that we dance to music, everybody has the ability to dance. Some of us, more than others, have the ability to look stupid when we dance. I'm particularly gifted in that. But tapping into that, tapping into the way that we move to sound is actually non-negotiable, because the physical movement is the basis for our musical experience. Music and dance are intertwined and cannot be separated. Walking, for example, when you hear a fast up-tempo song, the reason it feels up-tempo is because it's in relationship to your walking, running, sleeping, heart rate, body rhythms, physical body rhythms. Music is deeply intertwined with our physicality, and you must move musically in order to take advantage of that. If you are making music in your head, you're cut off from a massive powerhouse of musical spirit and opportunity. So moving when you practice is a really big one. When you listen to yourself, take the time to record yourself, play back, and dance to what you hear. Does it make you want to dance? I remember I was working on a buddy's album release, and he played the song for about 20 people at his pre-release party. And I noticed that for some songs, people would bob their heads, and for other songs, people would kind of dance in their chair a little bit. And it felt like sometimes the music from him didn't hit below the head. It was just up here in the head. And then other music really moves the hips, like dance music, for example, is just, built around that, optimized around moving the hips. When you listen to yourself, when you dance to what you listen, you will find out how that music moves you and how it's likely to move other people, because we're all physiologically so similar. So if you listen back and it's like you're just stuck, frozen, like a statue, like an analytic statue, you got to ask yourself, is that how you want other people to be an experience when you're playing? Or do you want them to flow and dance? If you're playing a minuet, are your feet moving? Are you swaying? If you're in 6/8, if you're in 2/4, are you marching, for example? How does it make you feel? How is the rhythm ever? Do you want to clap along? Is it off beats, on beats? All of that becomes extraordinarily clear when you start to move to music, when you practice dancing, and when you practice dancing to what you've played. The next place where you can move musically is in the interface with your instrument. And I'm going to pop off screen share for a second. And I was just practicing my fingerings for Brandenburg Concerto last night. And there's a way to practice that. Let's say it's da 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 dee da 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 dee da dee da dee da da dee da 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 da. Pretty boring. That would be an example of non-musical moving. But if I go a little slower so that I can enjoy this incredible thing, this instrument in front of me. Dum dum bum 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 dum 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 bum dum bum ba dum da 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 dee da da dee da da dee da dum. Then my fingers are moving musically, and I do that on my horn, and you just know. All of you know the difference of what it's like when you're relating to your instrument in a musical way versus when you're relating to it in a purely physical or unmusical way. So when you're practicing, make sure that you interface with your instrument in a musical way, such that the spirit of music is present. That's going to make a big difference. And then say you're practicing an hour a day or 2 hours a day. What about the other 20 hours or 22 hours that you have? Well, you may not move musically in your sleep, But when you're exercising, when you're washing dishes, when you're going about your day, there are numerous, infinite, abundant opportunities to move musically, to have a little snap. And you can do this while you walk, while you bike, while you drive even, maybe not snapping. But think about how you move and how music is flowing through your limbs, and you can live musically and move musically. And doing so means that you will be practicing 12 hours a day or 13 hours a day instead of 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day. So you can imagine that that doesn't just make a big difference on a day by day basis, but it compounds such that over a month, over a year, over 10 years, you are a dramatically different musician when you practice 12 hours a day being musical than 1 hour a day. So move musically through life, please. And practice music. You should feel like this guy in the photo, happy and kind of a little bit your own brand of weird. Get in the mood before you practice so that you're not just like jumping into the minuet and treating it like a daily activity, like pumping gas. That shouldn't be like that. Listen to music, dance a little bit, sort of prime the pump a little bit before you practice. Remind yourself why you're excited about music, why you love things. I do a little bit of listening before each practice session. Different things, cellists, percussionists, singers, whatever floats my boat that day, to get in the musical mood. And that really helps me such that I'm practicing music. Little chunks to big chunks means that a single note can be musical. Here's an unmusical single note, bop, and here is a musical single note. Different feelings, or bop could be angry music. As long as I'm putting my emotion into that music, then even a single note can be musical. Now we sequence things into bigger and bigger chunks. So let's say I'm excited. Dum da 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 dum da 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 dum. I can sequence into big chunks. And I can get bigger and bigger. This is good for when you're warming up. You start with little chunks of music and you start sequencing them together. You practice vocabulary and cells. For example, da 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 ba da would be a cell, like a melodic cell. This works really good for jazz players, but classical players too. Arpeggios would be an example of a cell that is used commonly in classical music. So you practice those, but you don't just go ba na na ni na 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 ni. You play it as a music, like as if it's from Mozart. Yum da 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 dee yum bum, and start to master the vocabulary of music so that you can sequence it together. The other way to go is big chunks to little details. So let's say that you have something fast, like a famous horn excerpt of this would be from Mendelssohn's Symphony, and the horn has to play. And if I try and manage each note by note, it gets like too micromanaged and it loses the sense of musicality. So if you're working on a lick, or if you're working on something musically challenging, technically challenging, don't insist on note accuracy at first. I totally disagree with this. People say, oh, you got to get it perfect every time. And if you don't get it perfect and you're practicing mistakes. That's wrong. If you get it perfect every time, then you're practicing perfectionism, and perfectionism will create debilitating stage fright. So I think that instead what you want to do is go from big chunks of gestures to managing the details within the context of the gross motor movement of the music. So let's say that I'm practicing an arpeggio, a voice arpeggio. Yum ba da dum ba da da. Yum ba da dum ba da da. That was really out of tune. It was where the rhythm wasn't great, but I've got the basic feeling. And in fact, I'm going to practice it to be even more triumphant before I go to the little details. Yum ba da dum ba da da. More triumphant now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice the details and see if I can just land on a little bit more in tune. Yum ba da dum ba da da. But I've kept the triumphant feeling to this arpeggio. And I can just practice that all day long, going more and more, infusing all the little cracks and details and filaments of opportunity with musicianship, not for the sake of technical perfection, but for the sake of infusing every detail of the articulation, of the tone, of the phrasing with music. And when you practice like that, you get in a flow state. I want to encourage everybody to be aware of what flow is, what flow feels like. In general, the definition of a flow state is when the challenge of a task is meeting your skill level and just challenging you a little bit. When you're in a flow state, you will feel focused, happy, aware, and you'll feel pleasure and happy. And that creates way better learning. Typical flow happens in a few different circumstances. Being in nature often creates flow. Being connected with others often connects flow. Having great physical sensation often creates flow, and having significant meaning creates flow. So I would say practicing in nature while feeling really connected to yourself and having a deeply embodied experience while playing music that's highly meaningful to you would probably be a cool way to truly enjoy your music making. That's an ideal. That's what this guy is doing right here in this photo. And we can at least hold that as a paragon of excellence that we can move towards. Welcome any questions about that, by the way, for our Q&A. And finally, the last point is to play with others. If you want to accelerate your language learning, you have conversations with other people. Well, music is a language. It's the universal language. It's probably, in many ways, the only hope for humanity. So it's really important that we make music with each other. And if you want to learn faster, it is not optional to play with others. You've got to find a way, find a ukulele club, find a glee club, make a barbershop quartet, whatever it is. If you're a pianist, find someone to collaborate on chamber music with. Chamber music is a huge learning experience. And the way that you can accelerate your participation in this is to take ownership of it and be the person that provides opportunities rather than waits for opportunities. So we all have musical friends. There are tons of online boards. Craigslist is a good way to do this. There's a thing called BandLab where you could do an online collaboration today. If you just search for digital online music collaboration, you can be making music with someone across the globe today for free and be better off for it. The whole world will be better off for it. Future of collaborative music practice, I think, is going online. One thing that Modacity is kind of working on prototyping right now is musical chat rooms that are like loop based rooms that have a particular tempo that anyone can jump on and contribute to the loop and upvote and downvote contributions. I would love to chat with anybody who's interested about the future of collaborative music practice. This is something we're looking for alpha testers and excited community members. So you can always reach me, marc@modacity.co. I'm sure that Chris will provide that link if you want to talk about that. But yeah, play with others, make music with others. That's why we do it. And I'll recap real quick. The 3 components that I believe will accelerate your music learning journey are to leverage time, to master your state, and to music more. Take a second to reflect on how yours compared. And our next actions are to do a 20-second meditation to reflect on this, and then listen within for any deep questions. And then I welcome musically asked questions. I will try and answer musically. All right. That was 20 seconds.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to say on behalf of everyone, I'm sure we'll have some thank yous coming in on the live chat, but I'll preempt them by just saying a huge thank you, Marc. That was phenomenal. And I'm sure that after that meditation, there are probably questions popping into people's heads. And I'll just throw in a prompt of my own, which is I would love to hear, and I'm sure Marc would be interested to hear, if you had any particular aha moments or light bulbs during that presentation. I would love to know what in that amazing smorgasbord of tactics and strategies and insights people found most useful. And I'm sure for everyone here, there was at least one thing where you're like, oh, that is my next step to make my music practice more effective. So number one, make sure you write them down. I'm so glad Marc asked everyone at the beginning to have a notebook and make notes, because there was a lot there to remember. But please do also pop them in the live chat and share with everyone else what you found most interesting or enlightening and what's going to be most useful for your own musical life. We did have some questions come in. I'll just shout out what I have made note of, and if I don't mention yours, please put it in the live chat again so we don't miss any. I have a question from Charles about the length of meditation, one about going slow to go fast, one from Kayla and Amy about habituation for piano players, one from Camille about blind dogs in meat markets, and from Napasha Music about maintaining changes. So if I didn't mention your question there, please do pop it in the live chat, or if you have a new question now, please put it in there and we'll do our best to get to everyone. And while we wait for a few questions to come in and people sharing that aha moments, Marc, you gave some lovely examples just along the way ad hoc of modacity in action there. But for anyone who isn't already using this app, I wonder if you could just give a short synopsis of what the app does, who it's for, how it can help.
Yeah, absolutely. For the last 20 years, I've been super fascinated about the gap between what science knows about learning and how musicians practice, and trying to close that gap with software. So Modacity is an iOS app right now that helps goal-oriented musicians practice better and learn faster. It offers a smart organization suite, so you can get organized on what you're practicing onto time-budgeted practice sessions. It allows you to practice better through integrated self-recording, guided deliberate practice, a built-in Metro drone and note-taking features. And we also offer like statistics and historical insight with automated time tracking and in-app chat if you have any questions about how to practice.
Wow, super cool. And it's one I enjoy using myself. I'll just give it my own personal thumbs up for sure. It's a terrific practice app. You might have to explain for people, what is a Metro drone?
What is a Metro drone? I also forgot to mention that we are offering 3 months free. So it's like a subscription app if you want the premium features. It's also free if you just want simple ones. And as I'm loading up the Metro drone here, if you download Modacity, or if you're already a Modacity user and you are not sure if you want to subscribe yet and you would like 3 free months to get started, just send a message in the app and say you attended this masterclass. We'll hook you up. What was that? That is a drone generator. And speaking of habituation, we could all probably just get used to this after a little bit and start to block it out. What the Metro drone does is it pulses the drone for you so that you know you line up with it, and you can adjust the articulation, have short or long. And the way I might practice it, dum da 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 dum da 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 da, something like that. It just helps keep tempo and time together and gives you sort of a richer, more holistic feedback. That's the Metro drone.
Very cool. Well, practicing with the drone is something we're big fans of at Musical U, particularly in our improvisation modules, for tuning your ear into a sense of the key and the tonic. It's a fantastic tool. And, I think as far as I know, Modacity is unique in having that Metro drone idea. Very cool. I'll share some of the thanks just very briefly. We've had tons of people saying thank you, Zach and Charles both say thank you. Margaret says great presentation, very inspiring. Napasha says thank you. Steve, great masterclass. And just to answer your question, Steve, we're going to have a limited time replay for everyone who's here, normally a 48-hour one. Or if you're a member of Musical U, you'll have access to the recording whenever you like. Nancy and a few other people also say thank you. People sharing aha moments. Before we dive into the question, I'll just shout out a few of those because I think they're quite it benefits everyone to understand what's impactful. And Karen shares her aha moment was the big chunks to little details idea. That's going to really help her with musicality. Amanda says the biggest thing she took from it was the quote about perfectionism, that practicing perfectionism makes for debilitating stage fright. And she's definitely going to teach that to her students. Steve found it fabulous and thought-provoking. And Steve appreciates the challenge to work from larger musical gesture practice and then work with details. So also that big chunks to details idea. And Nancy, doing a variety of things when I practice and chunking my practice will help me improve. So lots of aha moments and light bulbs going off there. And let's see, we had a few extra questions. I did see them in the live chat. Thank you. And Marc, if you don't mind going a little bit longer, let's just see if we can help people out with some of these questions. So the first was from Charles, wondering about length of meditation. He says he has experience with intensive meditation, but not much with daily meditation.
I would say you really start, it's like exercise in a sense, where you really start to reap the most benefits after you hit the 30 minutes a day mark. 30 minutes to 2 hours a day would be like pretty substantial. That's hard for a lot of folks. The next level down would be 11 minutes. After 11 minutes is the amount of time that it takes for your body to have what's called a relaxation response, which is like simply takes that long to create that response. So if you can at least nudge it up to a single 11-minute chunk, that's going to give you many of the benefits, not as many as if you do a 30-minute chunk. And I think in this case, interleaving is really your best friend. Like the way that I approach meditation right now could be better. I would love to do an hour in the morning and an hour at night. As it is, I meditate like 5 minutes in the morning. I meditate 15 minutes in the afternoon, and I meditate in short bursts of one breath to 10 breaths throughout the day. I think that that's really where you get the sort of like a continuous practice. Just like as you can dance through the day musically, you can meditate 1 breath, 2 breaths in the elevator, in the bathroom. So many people pull their phones out in the bathroom. I think like it's a really good opportunity just to like chill. So that would be my answer. Like do small ones throughout the day. Try to get at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
Fantastic. So there was a question that came in. I'm afraid I didn't grab the name, but it was about going slow to go fast. And we had just been talking about meditation and slowing down your overall pace. And the person was wondering, do you also mean like literally when playing to play your practice exercises at a slower tempo?
Like, I call it matrix mode practice. So instead of like trying to go like that, you go like that. And when you do this enough, then it becomes something that you can repeat, but it's smooth. It's still smooth. It's not jerky. And there's different ways to approach it. And this is where interleaving comes in. So take this passage from Mendelssohn. That's the macro level, but I might also want to go dum 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 dum. And one of my favorite techniques for this is called the spider metronomes. So I'm learning Flight of the Bumblebee right now, and I'll start at like I'll take a phrase and I'll do quarter equals 108, and then I'll bump it up to 112, down to 106, 116, 100, 120, 90, 130, and I'll go all the way down to 60 BPM on one side and 160 on the other side. And I'm alternating. And that's a really cool way. It's like covers the interleaving and covers go slow to go fast. It makes sure that you keep the macro level while also working on the details. It engages you musically. It's interesting. It's like, yeah, it hits all the points.
I just said that's very cool. I don't think I've come across that idea before, but I see the elegance of it. Very nice. Charles, who had the question about meditation, just says interleaving meditation. Wow, great approach. And yeah, I agree. So there was a lot of interest in the hacking habituation. I think that was a new idea to lots of people, and there were some comments about that. Marc, you did say you could speak a little more to how to change your location, but in particular, we had a question from Kayla and Amy, who are both pianists, one of whom plays a grand piano, wondering what is in it for them.
Look, your environment is so rich. The inner environment is one place where you can do that too. And one way that I hack habituation is to change my inner environment, especially on Thursdays, which is emotion practice day for me. And on Thursdays, I have a whole inventory of emotions like anger, joy, calm, resentment. And I will, like an actor, I will go, I play like emotion bingo, and I'll just land on one and, peace. And I'll play the scale peacefully. And then I flush the inner environment, and then, okay, shame. Like, what would this sound like if I'm feeling incredibly ashamed? And that trains a certain resilience. I learned this. I want to actually go into this for a second. I think it's really important. I noticed maybe 5-6 years ago that I was feeling sometimes a lot of shame in the concert hall. Something wouldn't go the way that I wanted, and I'd feel ashamed. And then I started to notice as I listened to myself more that I could tell when I was feeling ashamed, and that I had a certain sound. Or I could tell when I was feeling shy, and that had a different sound. Or I could tell when I was analyzing as I was playing, and that had a certain sound. And you could hear it. You could hear what it sounded like when I was analyzing. Or you could hear what it sounded like when I was managing my technique. You could hear what it sounded like when I was in an emotional flow state. And when you learn to listen that way, you never go back. You never go back to just saying, "Oh yeah, that was the right note, a good tone." So the reason that I state this is because, well, you don't change those kinds of patterns overnight. For better or worse, like shame in the concert hall, fear, anxiety, worry. A lot of us have them, and I don't have a lot of that these days. But 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I did, and so I practiced. What I did was I practiced cultivating those emotions in a safe place, in the practice room, understanding what they sound like and accepting them. And that is a different way to practice habituation, in a sense, is actually to get used to some of these challenging emotions by cultivating them, practicing them, seeing what they sound like, changing the inner landscape around, and always having something fresh in your environment, whether it's inner or external.
Wonderful. Well, there were two different and equally valuable answers there. I think, one is that your environment doesn't need to be where you physically are. It can be what physically is around you. And obviously, even if you're sat at a grand piano, you can put different objects in sight. You can change the lighting in the room. Presumably, you can change your environment in a number of ways. But I love that you took it deeper and talked about the inner state. And I guess that touches too on your mastery of state and emotional state when practicing too. It's part of that. Yeah, being very conscious of what's going on inside.
Yeah, real quick, as a pianist too, you probably want to get up from the piano bench and go play like table piano at the kitchen table and stuff. Sometimes too, that can be a way to like figure out what's going on here. That's not the piano's fault.
Terrific, great. Well, yeah. Kayla in the live chat is saying interesting. Thank you, appreciates that. Cool. So the next question, I love how it's worded. Camille was saying, can you address the blind dog in a meat market syndrome? By which he means so much music, so little time for all that repetition. So I guess the underlying question here is, Marc, how do you know what to spend all your repetition time on?
Well, they say repetition is the spice of life. So there's so much music, but it's like unsatisfying. I think this is a deeply personal answer in some ways. Like everybody, if you go to the buffet and there's a million different items, or the blind dog in the meat market, exactly. I think that where I want to take this is the concept of vertical alignment, where I believe in a lot of different cosmologies from around the world: African indigenous people, Peruvian cultures, even Taoists to an extent. I think Christians, you could look at it this way, believe that we are here for a purpose, and that purpose, you can think of it as something that you want to be in vertical alignment with. It's a long time, a whole lifetime or multiple lifetimes worth of directionality. Whatever you want to say that direction is, that's up to you. Um, but you can sense it, and I think the more in touch you are through meditation and through more ultimate practices with where your life is going, or where you'd like to guide your life, or where you feel your life is guided, depending on your system of truth, that you can start to winnow back and say, okay, that's sort of like the big bit. Well, what about like the next 10 years? What about the next 5 years? What about the next 6 months? What about the next 3 months? Where is this all going? And that gives you an ability to say no to a lot more, and say yes to the stuff that's really like, oh yeah, this is like it. And it's quite simple in many ways. Marie Kondo talks about this a lot. You pick up the article of clothing and you're like, does this spark joy? I think it's that kind of, there's a frequency, there's an inner listening of, is this really the thing for me right now? And if not, just let it go and say no and clear your slate and enjoy going deep into stuff and making true progress.
Wonderful. Well, I'm unsurprised but pleased that you did not give the answer of just practice your scales and arpeggios and do your technical exercises.
Yeah.
So we had a question from Asaf Rabi, who wants to know about recording. You recommended recording yourself. He was wondering how frequently and when do you recommend listening to your recording?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely listen to it. I think the two main categories here are as you're practicing and after you're practicing. And you want to listen as you're practicing. I think we miss that opportunity a lot. I think ensembles are worse off for this a lot of times. Even the best ensembles don't really get to hear themselves from the audience perspective. But as an individual, you can. So I think that an ideal cadence would be to play for 30 seconds or a minute sometimes, listen back, make an improvement. Unless you're doing calisthenic exercises or practicing for endurance, most of the time what you're doing is trying to create a little chunk of art, a little chunk of expression and art and communication. And that could be anywhere between 30 seconds and 5 minutes, or 60 minutes if you're really like making a big piece of musical art. Like a DJ has a 60-minute set, but you've got to have the time to listen back. So I recommend making small pieces. Like a writer wouldn't just write books. You write blog posts, you write poems, you write tiny little journal entries, and that gives you a chance to reflect on your skill as a writer. And we're going to map that to musician. Make little 30-second musical chunks, listen back. And then on the macro level, you do want to do some listening review away from the practice room. And I find driving is a good time to do that. And instead of listening to the radio, you can listen to recordings of yourself. I personally, I'm in California, so we have a lot of hot tubs. I love like listening to recordings in the hot tub or the bath. Yeah, over while I'm cooking dinner. There's a million ways to do it. While I'm before you practice is a really good time to listen to stuff, because you'll hear things and get excited to improve. Those are my answers.
Wonderful, thank you. We had a question from Amy, who was one of our pianists, and she's wondering if you have any recommendations for getting out of deep tension patterns. And she also notes that your suggestion about emotional environment might be relevant here, but she thinks you might have other hacks that could help.
Tension's tough. Yeah, it's real. I think that it's not a quick fix. but it's a worthy road to go down. And what I would recommend would be first getting some manual intervention, like getting some massage, getting some chiropractic. Even I don't think sometimes self massage isn't enough, and especially a good massage therapist will start to teach you awareness, proprioception. That needs to be balanced with learning and practice of the body. So yoga is a really good way to start to get more in touch with what's tense, what's released. Alexander technique is something that I recommend, but it needs a teacher. It can be expensive. Really worth doing. There's some good books on Alexander technique that can kind of get you there, but it's like an experiential transmission. Feldenkrais would be another one, guided movement stuff, dance. The kind of poor man's answer would be like, just squeeze your fist for a second right now, Amy, if you're still there. Squeeze it really hard. And everybody try this if you want. And then let it go and shake it out. And you were able to choose that. And now squeeze your shoulder and let it go. And squeeze your right leg on the floor and let it go. And you can just kind of systematically tense and release different parts of your body and start to gain some control and awareness over that. And then pretty soon you can do that at the piano. And it's just an awareness and mastery practice like anything else.
Fantastic. Well, Avi in the chat is saying there is a book on music practice in this masterclass, and please consider this, Marc. So I will add my support to that idea. We want the Marc Gelfo book of music practice. We'll just squeeze in.
I want to interrupt that for a second. I don't think books are the highest bandwidth way to transmit information anymore, and that's why I'm building an app so that it can be an interactive experience that is like pulling information from the internet and giving you a scaffold and a structure to have your own experience. So yeah, kind of yes book, but more app. Let's all make this app together as a community and really drive it forward to be awesome.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I will throw in a curveball question from a couple of people as to whether the app is available on Android or PC or Mac.
Not yet. Considering crowdfunding for Android, we would need about 2,000 people to sign up for that in order to make it happen. So we're ready. Like I'm down. We just need more people to participate.
Yeah, I sympathize with that. We've had the question often about our own iOS apps, and unfortunately the market for Android is just not comparable. And as much as we would love to have everything available on Android, it's hard to make it happen. So just last two questions, if you wouldn't mind, Marc. We had one from Napasha Music about maintaining these changes. He says he's super inspired by the class, but already worries creep in that I won't be able to maintain these changes. How would you handle that?
I would look at the worry. Look at the worry. If you're still there, the person who asked this question, just sit with it for a second and notice like, oh, okay, I'm worried. And bring a little compassion to that. Hey, I'm sorry that you're feeling worried. I'm acknowledging you for caring about your music practice and wanting to make the most of your time. I'm sorry that things don't stick 100% all the time. I'm sorry that it's tough to maintain things forward. Sorry that you may have forgotten stuff in the past, like bring some compassion to it and to the experience around that. And then on a practical note, I think just be realistic. I'm happy to send the slide deck to anybody who wants it. It was a lot of information. It's, a lifetime of exploration on this. And really just make little bits of progress every day. Just bring some reflection to it. You don't have to do all this stuff. That's going to stress you out. Don't be perfectionist about it. Just make some good improvements every day with the time that you have until you have new goals, and then start making improvements towards those goals on the endless path of mastery and enjoy.
Fantastic. I love that you combined both the inner and the practical answer there. And I'll throw in the one last question because I think it pivots to inviting you to come back for a part two on the other side of the coin, as it were. A question from Rowfaced, who said, the emotional bingo is interesting. Would you suggest musicians of all levels to incorporate identifying different emotion while practicing?
Oh yeah. Especially when you're a beginner. That's so important. It's so important. And you'll hear stuff. I hear this from beginners all the time. Like, one emotion that I hear a lot is uncertainty. And if you can choose to blast uncertainty through your instrument, blast it, piano, whatever, you can blast through anything. Then you'll know what it sounds like, and you'll know what it feels like. And then you'll realize, like, actually, I don't like the sound of uncertainty. And even if you're a beginner, you can play with certainty. It just requires some adaptations to what you're playing and how you're playing it, why you're playing it. So yes to emotional bingo for all levels.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure everyone in the audience feels the same way I do, which is we would love to sit here for a few more hours and listen to you talk, Marc, because you are chock full of practical and quite deep insight on the topic of music practice. But we have to be respectful of your time. You've got an app to develop, a concerto to perform, and we will wrap things up. So a huge thank you to everyone for joining us live today, or if you're watching the recording, thank you for tuning in. And just a massive thank you to Marc for coming and sharing so generously your wisdom on music practice. Let's just wrap up by reminding everyone where they can go, Marc, if they want to check out the Modacity app and learn everything about what you're up to.
Yeah, well, if you have an iDevice, iPad or iPhone, then just go into the App Store, search for Modacity. We're the only ones. It comes out as Modacity Pro Music Practice. Free to install. For other people, you can find us on Facebook, and we do push updates about like Android and iPad specific versions. That's the place, is to find us on Facebook and like us there. And you can just get in touch with me personally, Marc, M-A-R-C, at modacity.co, not com, but .co.
I will let Zach Brock from live chat have the last word, because he said, I want to go practice. We'll leave it at that. Thank you, Marc. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.